Judicial Circuit State Attorney Ed Brodsky, and you can't miss him, the tall guy in the back, Florida Department of Law Enforcement Special Agent in Charge, Eli Lawson. And I see that there are so many that are interested in this topic, and we are grateful to you and those of you in the media that are helping us get this word out today. I want to thank Sheriff Hoffman for organizing and helping spearhead this event with this important public safety message. As we know all too well, and it's been reported on frequently, we are in the midst of an overdose crisis in our country. In 1 year, we will lose over 100,000 Americans to overdose death, primarily due to fentanyl. Record numbers. Just to put that in perspective, that's almost twice the amount of Americans we lost in Vietnam in 1 year. And so this is something that we are asking the community to pay particular attention to, speak with your friends and family members about, and make sure that you are getting help. We know that fentanyl is driving this, and we know that most of that is flooding into the nation because of the breakdown in security and structure at the southern border. And that fentanyl and the poison, some of it mixed already when it comes into the country with xylazine, both in powder and pill form. That poison makes its way into Florida. In the Sarasota, Manatee, and DeSoto counties alone, nearly 250 people died from fentanyl poisoning in 2021, and that was a 485% increase since 2016. And as deadly and as terrifying as illicit fentanyl is proving to be, its lethality is being enhanced by a drug that is being brought and sold in most U.S. states legally, xylazine. This drug xylazine is also referred to as Tranq. It's also referred to as the zombie drug. The drug is sold online and sometimes in veterinarian stores outside of Florida. It is cheap, it is easily accessible, and so drug dealers will often mix it with fentanyl and other substances, leaving users in the dark about what they are actually taking. When treating an overdose, first responders that rush to the scene and do everything that they can to try and save a person that is overdosing, they don't know for sure in that moment what drugs the person has taken. So they may try to administer naloxone, but the patient will still struggle to breathe. And that is because xylazine is not an opioid, and it doesn't respond to opioid reversal agents like naloxone. If illicit opioids containing xylazine are used, naloxone is less effective in fully reversing an overdose. In 2016, Florida outlawed xylazine in Florida, but on a national scale, the FDA approved this sedative for animal use. Meanwhile, though we've had repeated warnings from the DEA about the danger of this drug, its prevalence in the United States, they have yet to act to schedule this drug, and Congress has yet to act to schedule this drug. Ahead of spring break, Florida issued a warning about xylazine and its dangerous effect when mixed with fentanyl. And about a week later, the DEA issued a public safety alert highlighting an increase in the number of drugs seized containing both xylazine and fentanyl, which has proven to be a deadly combination. And they confirmed what we know: xylazine is making fentanyl even deadlier. Seeing that alarming alert, we sent a letter to the DEA asking DEA and the federal government to follow Florida's lead and outlaw this dangerous drug. At the very minimum, schedule it. Congress is also exploring a national ban, and that is because of increasing number of deaths. According to one news report in 2021, more than 230 Floridians died after using Tranq, more than 30 of them in Sarasota, the third highest rate in the state. So I want to repeat that. Why are we all standing here today? We're not always in the same room like this. Sarasota has the third largest increase in xylazine deaths in the state. FDLE labs are also tracking the prevalence of this drug as it comes into state labs for testing. They've logged more than 1,000 cases of xylazine being present in processed evidence since 2021. Tranq was the 11th most frequently identified drug in FDLE crime labs in 2021. And again, I'm using this term Tranq, that's xylazine. Now in 2023, it is the 6th most frequently identified substance. That is a very short time frame to go from being the 11th most frequently identified substance to the 6th. And Sarasota is one of the major drivers in that increase. This year, FDLE lab analysts are identifying xylazine more than 55 times a month in their crime labs, up from 45 in 2022 and 32 in 2021. This deadly drug, as well as fentanyl and even nitazines, which I have been pushing to get scheduled in the Florida legislature this year. As you know, nitazines are deadlier than fentanyl, more potent than fentanyl. We call those the Frankenstein drugs. They will be permanently banned, hopefully, by lawmakers this session, but we know all of these drugs are in the drug supply right now. So tonight, those in this county and in this area could take illicit substances that contain xylazine, and they may not even know it. They are in the drug supply right now. These drugs have no warning labels. Instead, it is buyer beware, and if you are wrong about what is in the drugs, the price you will pay could be your life. But even if you do not die, people who use these drugs, Tranq or xylazine, are developing rotting skin lesions like you will see on some of our displays here. Their limbs are rotting away from the injection of this substance. Some have to have their limbs amputated. So in seeking a high, they are literally risking life and limb, as you can see in these demonstrations. Sadly, to some of us, we have been working on this a long time, and the presence of new substances always presents unique challenges. There are times like this where it's important that we get the word out in an urgent manner, which again, I go back to thanking you for showing up today and helping us do that, because people need to know that this unique substance, xylazine, is now in the drug supply here in Sarasota County, and we expect this will only continue to increase until there is some sort of nationwide approach, and until we can get folks that have been struggling with illicit substance disorders or challenges to seek help. You may have had an addiction in the past and put off getting help, but it has never been more important. The mixture of fentanyl and now xylazine in more traditional illicit substances has never been more prevalent. And so that's why we have worked extraordinarily hard to make sure that resources are out there. If you are struggling, you can go to treatmentatlas.org and put in information. It can guide you to where you can get help. It's never been more important. And I appreciate, again, you being here, and without further ado, I'll bring up your sheriff.
Thank you, General Moody. I want to thank you for bringing a light and shining it on this issue of xylazine, and you've been forward thinking on that, and what you've put on your website for our citizens to be able to get the resources they need has been fantastic, and hopefully people will pay attention to that. Here in our agency, our drug lab has discovered xylazine in drugs that we tested. Right on the other side of this wall behind me is our drug lab, over 150 times in the calendar year 2022. In 2022, our agency responded to over 100 fentanyl-related overdoses, and fentanyl is the drug most associated with xylazine. And the Attorney General mentioned 100,000 deaths nationwide. I think it's actually 107,000, 66% of which are associated with fentanyl. So you can see when fentanyl is involved and xylazine is on top of that, the situation that we have here. The DEA statistics show the South region, which includes Florida, obviously, the xylazine deaths have increased from 2020 to 2021 from 116 to over 1,400. That's a 1,000 plus increase in the South region of the United States, which encompasses the areas that we all up here work in. Xylazine, as the Attorney General mentioned, is an animal tranquilizer. That's where it gets the nickname Tranq. You've also probably heard the term zombie drug. I've read literature that says that those that are addicted to fentanyl that then have xylazine mixed in, the zombie part of that comes because it gives fentanyl, quote unquote, legs, where traditionally you would have symptoms with fentanyl that are then, accelerated, and they're able to get up on their legs virtually and walk around, and that's where the term zombie drug has come into play. As you can see from the photos here, xylazine is a vasoconstrictor. So when you get a wound or a scab or an ulcer with a vasoconstrictor that you are injecting mixed in with the fentanyl, this is the result. And it's significant, as the Attorney General mentioned, a lot of times folks are actually losing their limbs. Attorney General Moody also mentioned that it's Narcan and naloxone resistant. For those of you who don't know, the Sheriff's Office was the first agency in the state of Florida to go to naloxone. And we've been using that, and we've been saving hundreds of lives in this county. And I think that's why the AG's message is important here, because naloxone is not going to work on xylazine. So my message to you, and I appreciate all of you being here and pushing this out, because if one person hears it and one person or one family member takes action, then that's one less person perhaps that would lose their life. But it's hard to tell an addict not to go seek that next high. That's what they're trying to do, right? They use this, and now they're trying something else. And that's why I'm extremely proud of the addiction recovery pod that we have here in the Sheriff's Office, and how we're turning folks' lives around that are coming into custody. But there are many, many cases, as the AG alluded to, of folks that don't have the opportunity to get arrested and get into an addiction recovery pod or a drug court program that the state attorney is involved in because they die. So it's significant numbers that we're seeing here in Florida. The truth is, many of these folks don't get help, and family members don't speak out. So if you put this information out today by way of this press conference, and a brother, a sister, a mother, a neighbor, a member of your church sees this, hears it, maybe they'll encourage that person to get help. It will be what they need to be able to get into recovery and not have to be arrested or, God forbid, lose their life. So we appreciate you all being here today and getting the message out. It's important that we protect our citizens and that we try to make sure that they're not being exposed to fentanyl or xylazine, because as you can see, we're losing a lot of our citizens to these dangerous drugs. Thank you.
So I guess as I reflect on General Moody's comments and the Sheriff's comments, what we all need to be aware of is the fact that this is a drug that people do not know that they're taking, right? This is an important health warning that we all need to take notice of. And, the fact that the General's taken the time to come to Sarasota County and to meet with all of us and to speak to us speaks to the problem that we're having here in our community. This is not only a national problem, this has now become a problem here in Sarasota County. When you speak to the drug lab here, just as the sheriff alluded to, they're seeing that xylazine is prevalent here. I spoke to those folks, and when I spoke to the medical examiner here, when we look at the drug overdoses and the fatal drug overdoses that occur here in Sarasota County, we're seeing xylazine is very present in those autopsy results. So it's important that we take notice of that, and that we realize that this is not just a national problem, that this is now impacting Sarasota County. And folks that have a drug addiction problem and they're looking for drugs to help them with their situation, they need to understand there's a lot of hidden dangers in those drugs. A lot of times they don't know that there's fentanyl in the drugs that they're taking. And now they specifically don't know that xylazine is in there as well. So it's important that they understand the dangers. Fentanyl, as we know, is killing thousands and thousands of people. It's a national epidemic, and it's a danger throughout our nation. It's a danger here in our community and throughout the state of Florida. But now the fact that xylazine is being mixed into this equation is even worse. And as General Moody has previously said, one pill can kill. Because of the lethal doses that fentanyl and now xylazine mixed in potentially can cause, one pill can kill. So I echo those words of hers. So I think it's important that we speak to our children, that we speak to young adults, and that folks in this community pay attention. They may think that they're getting a very safe high, but right now, with fentanyl and xylazine that's present in these substances, they're at extreme risk for fatality. And if fatality is not bad enough, and you look at these images about necrotic tissue that can lead to amputation, and these are very significant ramifications of illicit drug use. Now, right now, xylazine is a Schedule I controlled substance, which means it has no medically approved use in the United States. It was first seen in Puerto Rico, and then it was seen in the city of Philadelphia. And now it's being reported that we see this drug all throughout the United States. In Philadelphia, when they looked at the presence of xylazine and they tested the illicit narcotics that were being recovered off the streets of Philadelphia, in 90% of them, they were finding that there was a presence of xylazine in the drugs. So why is it that this xylazine is being added into these drugs? It's being added to opioid drugs significantly because it reduces the cost of opioids and it increases the high, right? So drug dealers that are making these and adulterating these drugs are doing it for profit at harm, obviously, to the folks that they're giving it to. And the problem is it's turning them into drug zombies. That's the reality, right? They're turning into living zombies, which are creating necrotic flesh that can lead to amputation. And as they've both said, the general said and the sheriff have said, Narcan won't work because xylazine is not an opioid. Okay, so it will not work. So when law enforcement and first responders are there trying to save your life, it's not going to make a difference. And this is an alarming trend, and for that's why I'm grateful to General Moody for highlighting this problem and being here to share that with us. And as the general said, in 2021, we had 236 deaths in Florida as a result of xylazine. And on average, in 2021, we saw that there were 22 people that die every day from a drug overdose. 22 people. And now, with the dangers of fentanyl being mixed with xylazine, what we fear, and the reason that we're here, is that we fear that those numbers are going to increase, so it'll be greater than the 22. So together, as a community, we can make a difference. We have to be looking out for one another and looking for those signs and indicators if somebody may be in need of treatment. And as the sheriff said, he has an amazing recovery pod. We have a very robust drug court program. And one of the things, unfortunately, I've said is the price for admission into some of the very best treatment programs is you have to be arrested to go into the Sarasota County Jail and get that recovery pot. Or you have to be arrested and go into the court system in order to get the drug court program. But we have other programs out in the community. So we hope that people take notice because right now, life is in peril for those that choose this life. So in the meantime, for those that are peddling these drugs, those that are in possession of these drugs, I can assure you law enforcement here stands shoulder to shoulder, and we stand together as prosecutors and with the Attorney General that we will fully prosecute those that possess and those that peddle this poison. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Special Agent in Charge Eli Lawson with FDLE Fort Myers. Our Fort Myers region, just for context, encompasses Manatee County, south to Collier, and eastward to Okeechobee County. It's an honor for me to be here today to discuss this important issue, the dangers of xylazine and other drugs that it's mixed with, and to show for public awareness the commitment that your law enforcement partners have in combating this dangerous drug. This emerging trend, xylazine drug cocktails mixed with fentanyl, heroin, and others, as you've already heard, is extremely dangerous, extremely addictive, imposes what is already an opioid epidemic exponentially becomes worse now with this introduction of this substance. Drug traffickers, cartels, gangs, whatever, have this readily available to them. It's, as you heard, it's being cut into other substances to increase profits and to increase the effects of drugs like fentanyl. Xylazine, we've heard it called Tranq and zombie, as you have heard, seen the effects of it as you've already heard today. It's literally rotting flesh from intravenous drug users, just like this. These are all too common in hospitals across the state. Simply said, animal tranquilizer is not intended for human use, period. You've heard that Narcan is not effective, and that's very true. I would point out it is still effective for those drugs that it is mixed with, so there is some benefit of it. Just to bring you a few data sets from FDLE, we have 6 state crime labs across the state, including one that services Southwest Florida and Fort Myers. Xylazine, when it was first put as a controlled substance in 2016, FDLE immediately began to analyze substances for the presence of xylazine. We had less than 24 cases that year. I think it was around 22. Fast forward all the way up to this first quarter of 2023, and we're on track for 650 cases this year alone. As you heard Ms. Moody say, 2 years ago, it was the 11th most common drug. It went to 9, now 6. It's the 6th most commonly encountered substance at FDLE chemistry labs, right behind common drugs like heroin and cocaine and fentanyl. Xylazine, I think we've impressed upon you the serious threat that it poses. It's growing in frequency. It's inundating our laboratories. It's causing overdoses, amputations, and of course, unfortunately, deaths. We are seeing it a lot more in our crime labs, processing it for FDLE investigations and our partner agencies. But I want to express that FDLE is committed to our partnership in stopping the flow of dangerous drugs into our communities to protect our citizens and visitors. It's partnerships like these, and especially for Ms. Moody, for Mr. Brodsky in prosecuting these cases, to bring an impact to this epidemic that we're seeing in our area. Thank you for having us today.
Well, as you heard from those that have joined me today, xylazine, Tranq, or zombie drug is now a big concern for authorities, not only in Florida, but across the United States, as we are seeing it affect so many of our citizens, and we're seeing its rapid rise in prevalence here in the United States and in Florida. So we appreciate you being here and helping us get the word out, and I'd be happy to take any questions or refer any questions to those that have joined me today if you have any.
Several years ago, when we first saw fentanyl, carfentanil make its way into heroin supply or be sold as heroin, this area, Sarasota, Manatee, was also seeing the highest rate. Any insight as to why that phenomenon is and why we're seeing it again?
Well, I can tell you why we're seeing such a rapid increase in fentanyl deaths within the last 2 years, and that is because there has been an incredible breakdown of application of federal law as it relates to security and application at our southern border. And so the supply of fentanyl, carfentanil, all of these synthetic opioids that are highly potent, highly lethal, are now in the United States. And I wish that Florida was not a part of that, but they make their way here to Florida. We know there's a lot of migration into our state. So you're going to continue to see this until we can get some sort of handle and security at our southern border. Now, I will turn it over to the sheriff as it relates to Sarasota County, because he may have a better perspective as to why we're seeing it more in Sarasota.
Sure. So I say this often, and you've probably heard the term, every sheriff is a border sheriff. And I truly believe that. I have friends that are on the southern border. Sheriffs have one sheriff that has 84 deputies, and he has 87 miles on the Arizona border. So you can imagine the task that he has with policing that. But if you look at the seizures of fentanyl on our southern border, it's up over 350%. By the Border Patrol's own numbers. So clearly that is the channel by which this is coming. I've heard other folks say, well, it's not the Canadian border, it's not our ports, it's the southern border for sure, for a variety of things, but particularly fentanyl. So adding other drugs, xylazine, other things that we've seen, even marijuana, meth, a variety of drugs coming through that southern border. As far as this sheriff is concerned, that's where the issue lies with the volume that we're seeing in Sarasota County.
Are there certain drugs that xylazine is being found in most commonly? Which ones are they?
I would say what the DEA has been warning about, and what certainly we have been echoing, is that xylazine is now being mixed with fentanyl. And because fentanyl is now so prevalent in the United States, as you know, the majority of overdose deaths last year were a result of fentanyl, and it is being mixed in with that. Why? Why are drug dealers doing it? You heard that referred to a little bit. There is some discussion out there that it increases the length of the high, but it also at the same time prevents naloxone from being effective when first responders try to revive folks. So I believe that those here standing with me would tell you that the urgency in this is because they're now seeing it mixed in with fentanyl, because fentanyl is the most prevalent drug, the most potent drug that is killing Americans and certainly Floridians. That is what we're warning about, because it is preventing it from always being responsive to naloxone. That is why it's urgent that we get the word out now.
Is there any age range of people that are using these drugs?
Well, I'm going to give you a stat which is certainly concerning to me, and that is that the 18 to 45-year-old range, our working age population, those that would sign up certainly to be a part of our military force age range, are the ones that are experiencing the highest rates of overdose. And I think that should concern everyone.
Can I jump in right there real quick with the demographic?
Yes, ma'am.
You just mentioned something that touched on the psychology of this case. Can you talk to us some more about that? Why is that demographic being impacted? Is there something that's happening that we're not seeing with the naked eye that's causing that?
Well, we know that the 18 to 45 range is the range where we're losing the most people to overdose. I can also tell you what is extraordinarily concerning to me as a mother, not just as Attorney General, is the fastest growing rate is those under 14 years old. So I'm going to repeat that. The fastest growing rate of those that are overdosing on fentanyl are children under the age of 14. And that just shows you how prevalent it now is in society, that we have young children that are able to come in contact with this drug. So I think there are many reasons to be concerned with the amount of fentanyl that is presently in this country, that we've already allowed to get into this country, and how that exposes our citizens to danger. We have been able to use naloxone in a way to mitigate the death rate, but this new drug xylazine may present some challenges in that. You know, first responders are routinely asked to go above and beyond what they originally imagined the job to be when they took the oath. And I, for one, think it requires an incredibly special, brave, heroic person. I'm about to recognize one of them in just a moment, to become an officer. We are now asking them to rush in and respond and save lives using medication. And imagine now being told that in many instances when you come upon someone who may have had xylazine mixed in with a fentanyl drug, no matter your effort, no matter how many doses you give, it may not be effective, and you may no longer have that tool. And so not only for their own personal safety, but for making sure that they can effectively do the job we're asking them to do, we need the public to be aware of this and those that are struggling to get help.